Now that we have discussed the two different types of Filipino art, we have number one, traditional Filipino art, and number two, we have non-traditional Filipino art. Let us continue with the different types of Filipino musical instruments. Now, as you can see on the table, I have divided it into two sections. On the left, you can see the horn, bustle, sax classification, which we will be using to classify the Filipino musical instruments, and its counterpart, which is the five musical instruments classification that is being taught in our schools. So let us start first with the horn, bustle, sax classification. There are four different types under the horn, bustle, sax. The first one, we have Aerophones. The second, we have Chordophones. The third one, Idiophones. And the last one, Membranophones. For the five musical instrument classification, we are accustomed to classifying our instruments as woodwind. We have brass instruments, string instruments, percussion instruments, and electronic musical instruments. As you can see, the horn, bustle, sax has a counterpart for the five musical instrument classification. For aerophones, its counterpart is the woodwind and brass instruments. For chordophones, its counterpart is the string instruments. For idiophones, it has no counterpart for the five musical instrument classification. The membranophone, its counterpart is the percussion instruments. And for electronic musical instruments, it also has no counterpart under the horn, bustle, sax. The first classification is aerophones. Aerophones refer to musical instruments that produce sounds without the use of strings or membranes. An example of Filipino musical instrument under aerophones is the kalele, which is a long bamboo tube of the Bontoc people. Here on your left side is an example of the kalele. Here is an example on how you play the kalele. Our second type of Filipino musical instrument is chordophones. Chordophones refer to musical instruments which produces sounds by way of plucking strings between 2 points. An example of a Filipino musical instrument under chordophones is saludoy, which is a bamboo guitar of the Tiboli. Here is an example of a saludoy.
Okay.
Here is an example of how you play the saludoy. The next classification is idiophone. Idiophones refer to musical instruments which produces sound by way of vibration, but without the use of strings or membranes. An example of a Filipino musical instrument under the category of idiophone is kubing, which is a jaw harp of the ata and manobo. Here is an example of a kubing. Here is an example of how you play the kubing. The last category of Filipino musical instrument is membranophone. Membranophone refers to musical instruments which produce a sound by way of vibrating stretched membrane. An example of a Filipino musical instrument under the category of membranophone is dabakan, a glass-shaped drum of the Maranao. Here is an example of a dabakan. Here is an example of how you play the dabakan.